Okay, so we left off, we were talking about this decision that Tim O'Brien finally makes at the end of On the Rainy River. And it has to do with, this idea of his reputation and not wanting to be viewed in the eyes of others as a coward. So it comes down to this life or death decision. He might die after all in the war. This life or death situation decision that he finally makes it based on something as sort of um, superficial as his reputation, his masculinity. So on page 61 at the bottom there, we have his thought process. He says, all those eyes on me, the town, the whole universe, and I couldn't risk the embarrassment. It was as if there were an audience to my life, that swirl of faces along the river, and in my head I could hear people screaming at me. Traitor, they yelled, turncoat, pussy. I felt myself blush. I couldn't tolerate it. I couldn't endure the mockery or the disgrace or the patriotic ridicule. Even in my imagination, the shore just 20 yards away, I couldn't make myself be brave. It had nothing to do with morality, embarrassment. That's all it was. And right then I submitted. I would go to war, I would kill and maybe die because I was embarrassed not to. So it's sort of this ironic situation where we think of someone going to war as doing something heroic, doing something brave, because they're going to risk their life. And here he is sort of ironically saying the opposite. So he's saying, I went to war, I was a coward. So his very last words on page 63. The day was cloudy. I passed through towns with familiar names, through the pine forests and down to the prairie, and then to Vietnam, where I was a soldier, and then home again. I survived, but it's not a happy ending. I was a coward. I went to war. So the irony of that last line suggests, it's sort of he's defying our expectations or all that cultural baggage that we have in relation to how we perceive of a soldier and somebody who serves in the military. So he's saying he was a coward for going, right? He would have been heroic, he would have been courageous had he followed through on this decision to not go to war, because that's what he really wanted to do. And it's just the cultural pressures, the fear of being embarrassed, the fear of being labeled a traitor, a turncoat, a pussy. All these things sort of play into his decision to enter the war rather than risk ruining his reputation and being, made fun of. So we have another example of how masculine identity is sort of closely tied to cultural ideas around being courageous, being heroic, not being a coward, not being viewed as weak or vulnerable. So there's a lot of pressure, peer pressure, social pressure, and all those lessons that he was taught as a child. So emulating the cowboy, emulating the Lone Ranger, looking up to sort of masculine role models, not wanting to disappoint his father, not wanting to embarrass himself in front of his peers, and the townspeople. So all of this together sort of informs his final decision to go through with military service. So he's kind of throwing our perception of what is heroic, challenging our notion of what is courageous by calling himself a coward at this moment that he decides to serve his country. So there's a lot of irony at the end there. And yeah, this also relates back with the things that carried the short story that we talked about before, where he also talks about, you know, the shame that the men carry, the fact that they all have to hide their fear and maintain their reputations. So he'll talk about, you know, the things that men are killed and died because they were embarrassed not to. It was what brought them to the war in the first place. Nothing positive, no dreams of glory or honor, just to avoid the blush of dishonor. That was on page 21 as well. So he's reiterating this idea that, you know, for a man, the greatest fear is not dying, but of losing one's reputation, of losing one's masculinity. Um, and, you know, you don't want to be viewed as a coward or as a pussy, so you risk your life in sort of what it boils down to, just to be seen as, you know, a tough guy, as a soldier, and fulfill those masculine roles. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about in referring to on the Rainy River. So we'll move on in our discussion